I am pleased tonight to welcome the Green Party's candidate for president, Dr. Jill Stein, and the Libertarian Party's candidate for president, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, back to this program. Tonight is the second of our three-part conversation. Part 3 will be available for viewing exclusively online at our PBS website starting at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time immediately following the first airing of this broadcast. For now, let's get the conversation started. We will focus on foreign policy. Both candidates, once again, have agreed to limit their responses to 90 seconds. The first question is for both of you. For you first, Governor Johnson, are Julian Assange and Edward Snowden heroes or enemies of the state?
Based on what I know about Edward Snowden, and based on what I know is that the information that he made available, which he made available to major news outlets for them to release, because he was afraid if he did that, that he might put people in harm's way, or that people would get hurt as a result of that. To my knowledge, no one has been hurt, and based on that, I would pardon Edward Snowden. I would like to turn the satellites away from the United States. There is a process in this country, due process. Someone suspected of terrorism, go to a judge, get a warrant. But in my opinion, when the NSA, through the FISA court, says we want to tap into 110 million Verizon users, that is not the country that we live in. WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, to my knowledge, what he is doing is releasing information, period. That's what he is doing. I do put Edward Snowden in the hero category. Assange, I think, has been very value-added in revealing information that we all had conjecture over. Hillary Clinton, as an example, saying one thing to Wall Street, saying another thing to Main Street.
Dr. Stein, same question for you.
In my view, they are both heroes because they both revealed acts being taken by our government in violation of our constitutional rights. The spying, the mass surveillance, and in the case of Julian Assange, the war crimes that were being committed in our name. And I think it has been invaluable to the American people to be informed about what actually has been going on in violation of our rights, in violation of due process. And in the case of Edward Snowden, corrective action, at least the beginnings of corrective action, have been taken at the congressional level. We would be completely uninformed right now of the massive violation of our right to privacy. So I think they both deserve their freedom, they both deserve pardons, and they both deserve a hero's welcome.
Governor Johnson, again, this question for you. You support the Trans-Pacific Partnership, better known as TPP, yet you said you find it imperfect. In what ways? How would you change it?
Well, I think nothing is perfect, but if there is a takeaway that I've had serving as governor of New Mexico for 2 terms, the takeaway is to try and sign on to anything that makes things better. Are things perfect? No. Oftentimes, and in that context, I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. But based on my assessment, and by the way, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this blindly. I have economics advisors. Jeff Myron is my economics advisor. The staff at Chapman University, the faculty at Chapman University. The consensus, the overwhelming consensus is that TPP is positive, that it would result in more U.S. jobs, that it would eliminate many of the tariffs that exist right now. Is anything perfect? No, but does this advance free trade? It does, and bottom line, free trade, more U.S. jobs, not less U.S. jobs. Crony capitalism, when government picks winners and losers, this advances the government making less of these. In other words, this gets government out of the equation. This advances genuine free trade. Free trade, the opposite of crony capitalism.
Dr. Stein, you have said that TPP fundamentally attacks American democracy and sovereignty. Your words. Which existing trade deal do you support, if any?
So there are bilateral trade agreements that the U.S. has, for example, with most countries. that are a part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are trade deals within Latin America that are based on promoting fair trade, that are based on promoting a more just and fair economy. There are different models of trade deals. You know, I think with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's clear what we're getting. This is NAFTA on steroids. This is not a good thing. This is a very bad thing that sent at least 1 million jobs overseas, that closed about 60,000 factories, that depressed our wages. And perhaps most disturbing of all is this system of investor-state dispute resolution that creates a court that's not even a part of our own domestic courts. These are judges appointed by the World Bank that conduct their own tribunals, that enable corporations to overrule our democratically established laws and regulations that protect our health, our jobs, our environment, even protecting our banking system from financial corruption, a healthcare system in which we can have bulk negotiations with pharmaceutical companies. All of that goes out the window with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's very important that we stop it.
This question goes to you first, Dr. Stein. You both oppose the drone wars, and you both oppose boots on the ground to fight ISIS in Syria and in Iraq. How do you propose then that we deal with ISIS, or ISIL if you prefer?
Great. So it's really important to look at the track record here, because the track record of more violence, of bombing, of sending in troops has been a disaster. Every one of these interventions, starting with Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, has been an utter disaster. Each terrorist group that we have tried to contain in this way is stronger today, has more territory, and with each turn of the cycle of violence, we have a more ferocious and vicious form of terrorism to deal with. Witness ISIS, which grew out of the chaos of Iraq and Libya. So I'm calling for a new kind of offensive in the Middle East, a peace offensive, which begins with a weapons embargo, because currently we are providing the majority of weapons that get into the hands of all parties to the conflict. We are calling for a weapons embargo and a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries, in particular our allies, who are continuing to fund terrorist enterprises around the world. Hillary Clinton herself identified the Saudis as still, long after 9/11, still the major funder of terrorist extremism around the world. So we can take a stand in the right direction, use our moral authority for an intervention that will actually work, instead of more of these catastrophes that are bankrupting us, taking more than half of our discretionary budget.
Governor Johnson, how do you fight ISIL?
Well, first of all, we should stop with supporting regime change. If we are attacked, we should attack back. We should have an invincible national defense. But I stress the word defense. And in my lifetime, I can't think of one single example where we have gone in to support regime change where it has turned out positive. We created a vacuum in Iraq when we invaded. We took out Saddam Hussein. We created a vacuum when we went in to support the oust of Assad in Syria. And if you take Aleppo as an example, you've got Assad on the west side of Aleppo. On the east side of Aleppo, you've got the Free Syrian Army, which we supported. And when we supported them, there was all this conjecture that the arms that we gave them would end up in the hands of the Islamists. They were fighting hand in hand with the Islamists to fight Assad. Well, that happened. And also those arms ended up in the hands of ISIS, Raqqa, which arguably was created because of the void, the vacuum, because of our invasion of Iraq, and that Saddam's henchmen fled to Raqqa. We're supporting the Kurds against ISIS. The Kurds are sideways with our Turkish ally that aren't such a good ally anymore because of our invasion of Iraq. And before any of this started, we gave resources to Assad to fight the Islamists before any of this started.
Dr. Stein, I hear you, and thank you for that response. Dr. Stein, just trying to watch our time. We're on to you now. What would a CIA look like under a Jill Stein administration?
It would be a professional organization which advises the president on what the realities are of the threats to the United States. And the CIA has had integrity in the past. And I think it could going forward. But we need to ensure that it is not enveloped by a military-industrial complex that is ruling the day and that is looking to beat the war drums. It should be neutral. It was certainly politicized under Dick Cheney, who was generating intelligence that was extremely flawed, that helped drive us into the war in Iraq. We need intelligence that is reliable, that is not politicized, and that's going to a White House which has an even hand and which is not funded by the war profiteers, which are pouring money into both the Democratic and Republican parties. It also needs to be free of this revolving door in broader government, where people are moving from the defense industries and the defense contractors into the Department of Defense.
In 15 seconds, do you trust the intel that's coming out of CIA these days?
Not entirely.
All right.
So, for example, the intel, which is, I'm not sure if it's coming, I don't know who it's coming from, actually. And it seems to be Homeland Security and the NSA, which is talking about the Russians being the source of the hacking.
And you don't buy that?
I don't buy it. I mean, where's the evidence?
Okay.
Why don't they show it to us? They're talking about motives and methods. That's all. That's not evidence.
Governor Johnson.
And that's very dangerous.
Governor Johnson, this question's for you. You oppose torture. You're clearly on the record about that. You oppose torture, yet you support Guantanamo. How do you square the two? How do you reconcile the two?
Well, by support Guantanamo, I am absolutely opposed to Guantanamo for all the reasons that we should be, and that would be torture and detention without being charged. But there does need to be a facility to house those prisoners that have no home. And by have no home, clearly they're guilty. And by the way, this could all be done via military tribunal when it comes to due process, something that is not currently taking place. But if we were to send many of these detainees at Guantanamo back to their home countries, they would end up getting killed if we did that. So a facility like this needs to exist. When Obama said, hey, I'm going to close Guantanamo, well, what he should have said was, hey, I am closed, which he did. He said he closed Guantanamo to torture and to detainment. The detainment without being charged still exists. But if we close Guantanamo, we're going to have to open up a similar facility somewhere else. So one of my problems with Obama is transparency. Just tell us why you didn't close Guantanamo, given the fact that you said you were. And the reason that he's not closing Guantanamo are those things that I'm raising right now, those same reasons.
While you're reconciling,